you can start to think about, well, okay, how much Bitcoin would I need to live the life that I want to live based on, well, what are my monthly living expenses? Some people don't want to sell their Bitcoin. Other people are much more in favor of not taking leverage on your Bitcoin. So it's really, it's up to the individual. But the way I've developed the calculator is to look at a couple different scenarios of using your Bitcoin as collateral. But do I think Bitcoin will outperform gold or real estate or, S&P index funds? If you wanted to retire today, how much total Bitcoin would you need throughout a 20-year period to kind of show you, well, the maximum amount I would need at a 50% LTV would be 1.9 Bitcoin, but that wouldn't even happen until year 5. Like, oh, it's too volatile. It's like, I don't want to invest. What if I buy the top? And I'm thinking, yeah, buy the top, but buy the bottom and buy the middle and buy everything. Like, just be consistent with your purchases. That will flatten out your cost basis.
You made a really cool calculator side with a lot of things that we can look at today. But before, as with every guest, give the viewers and the listeners some background to who you are and why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Shane. I spent, 20 years in fintech, selling technology solutions, services to Fortune organizations. Did that for 20 years, kind of hit that point in your early 40s where you're like, man, is this really what I want to be doing forever? And I thought, how could I do something that maybe I'm a little bit more passionate about that I can combine with some skills and expertise I've picked up personally, and that led me to Bitcoin, because in 2017, I really started paying attention to Bitcoin, blockchain, what it was, problems that it solved. And of course, I was into non-Bitcoin stuff for a long time and, did mining, participated in some ICOs, really followed the tech and was trying to find that next, 10x token investment, whatever I could, invest in and, receive all the benefits. And so I wasn't paying as much attention to Bitcoin early on. And then I think it was probably 2022, I stumbled across this guy named Seyr, and just the way he talked and his confidence and the way he saw the world and his whole story just got me to really kind of stop and think about some of the things he was saying and pay a little bit more attention to Bitcoin. And not just that, but really the problems that Bitcoin solves. Because if you don't understand the problems that Bitcoin solves, you won't take it as seriously as a solution, right? It won't make as much sense to you because you don't necessarily understand the problems that it's solving. And that led me down so many different rabbit holes of, reading Creature from Jekyll Island, reading End the Fed, reading all kinds of books on the history of money, what is money, the financial plumbing, financial markets, inflation, all these things. And fast forward to today, and I'm fully invested in Bitcoin. Like, that's where I spend most of my time. That's where I work. That's my passion, my hobbies, and I'm trying to educate and help other people get to that same place through both understanding the fundamentals of Bitcoin and what it is, but really getting them to at least understand why Bitcoin came to be and the problems that it solves based on the broken nature of our financial system.
Interesting. It's this is such a basic thing, but we have this market phase where actually a little bit of new people are joining. So I think it might be a good idea to talk about it. What is kind of the main problem that you are seeing that kind of opened your eyes when you listen to Microseed that Bitcoin is solving, that you will see also like now in 2025 that makes Bitcoin so special this year?
It's kind of dark, right? I mean, Michael Saylor's talks and some of his mentions of, hurdle rates and the true nature of inflation and how CPI is actually synthetic and it's made up. And that just got me thinking and asking myself questions and being curious, like, do I even know what that means? What exactly is that? And, you look at what Saifedean talks about, Jack Mallers, Lynn Alden, like you tune into some of these people and they're all talking about the same thing. And it's that the true nature of monetary debasement is so much worse than they really lead us to believe, and they obfuscate the data, right? They kind of hide the true nature of how bad it is, the true nature of inflation, and that's, I really think, the problem that people just need to be aware of. Now, if that leads them to Bitcoin, great. But the way I've been, trying to orange pill friends and family is like, look, let's not talk about solutions. Let's just make sure you understand the problem. And then once you do, well, you're now at a better place. You can pick hard assets. You can pick real estate or stocks or gold or whatever you want to pick to allocate your resources to and your economic energy. But man, just, don't get stuck in this fiat trap of parking your money in a bank and earning 2%. Like, that's just eroding your wealth long term, and you just don't know it. So I think, to summarize, I would say it's really just the true nature of debasement and how bad it is versus, what they actually tell us publicly.
Yeah, and it's a hard topic because so many people still save in fiat, which like if you at least are on the point where you have ETFs or like some other investments, you at least get the kind of the problem a little bit. But there are a lot of people that don't own any asset, even though they have cash flow. Like even if they have positive cash flow, I mean, it's a different topic if you don't have cash flow and you're struggling with income. But if you have positive cash flow and you're still saving in fiat, at that point, like it's your own fault. Like it's so clear that inflation is bad and that you should invest. And it's sad and for me to see those people that still save in US dollars and in euros. Maybe we can talk on more on like your positive outlook on Bitcoin. And you made some really nice calculators. Maybe you can give us some overview of like why you are decided to make those the website and all the things that you're kind of working on. And then you can show us a little bit of the calculators, because I think it's really interesting to have it measurable, like how to retire on Bitcoin. And like, I think that was, what is it, 16 calculators, like a lot of calculators on that website.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my background also includes, I'm a data guy. I'm a math geek and a data guy, and I love spreadsheets. As time has gone on, I've found a lot of joy building mathematical models and crunching numbers. I've sort of taught myself, different formulas, different best practices, different strategies for using Google Sheets and Excel and other tools like that. And yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of people miss, kind of getting back to your first question, what a lot of people miss is, the benefits of being allocated to better performing assets and how those could be integrated into everyday common financial scenarios, right? And that was really the at the heart of why I wanted to build these tools, because so many people go through life thinking very short term, right? Which we in Bitcoin know is not necessarily a great idea. Like having a longer term mindset can be very, very beneficial. And so you think of like buying a car. So many people are like, okay, I'm going to put as much money down on this car as I can because I want the lowest monthly payment. And it's like, yeah, but you should really run the math on that, because that money that you're putting into that car is immediately depreciating along with the car, right? Same thing with the house. It's like buying a house, buying your forever home is like this life milestone. People get excited about it because it's also the start of perhaps a new family or a new point in your life, right? You've got your dream home. And people look at it as an investment, but people often also overlook the reality of real estate as an asset, which is that, it appreciates maybe 5% per year. So all that extra down payment that you put into your house feels good, but is it actually helping you achieve your longer term financial goals of growing your wealth? And oftentimes the answer, is no, because again, the 5% appreciation in that asset is oftentimes going to be outdone by, say, even NASDAQ stocks, tech stocks, index funds, and of course, Bitcoin, right? When you look at some of the Bitcoin historical growth rates, the compound annual growth rate. So anyway, that was really at the heart of the calculators, is just helping people understand basic financial literacy, using other people's money, compounding, the impacts from inflation, time value of money, opportunity cost, etc., and trying to make it fun, right? Trying to make it interactive and be able to learn in a way that's not just sitting in front of somebody just talking to you nonstop, but rather you can do it hands on. You can plug in your own inputs from your own life. You can model different CAGR growth metrics, right? And really see all the different outcomes, through a smartphone or through your desktop or laptop or tablet in just a more fun, interactive way.
You also wrote, I don't know if it's from you or for someone else, but the fiat trap is also on the website. Is that coming from you, the book?
Yes, yes. So one of the things I encountered across the last, few years of trying to orange pill others is kind of going back to what we talked about. Most people don't really understand the dark history of fiat or inflation or central banks or monetary policy or what is Bretton Woods? What is the abandonment of the gold standard in 1971? How did the central or the Federal Reserve even start? Who was part of that meeting on Jekyll Island? Who are they, and where do they fall into the socioeconomic ladder and everything else? And so that was really the goal of the fiat trap, was just to outline some of the key dates kind of going back in the history of money without it being, a 400-page book. I feel like, hey, I read a lot of those 400-page books. I've studied a lot of this. And so maybe I can synthesize all of this down into you know, a 10 to 15-minute read over lunch to kind of get the high level details about the history of fiat, some of the key events that shaped, where it broke and what those impacts have been. And then of course, how Bitcoin can be used as a solution.
And this is the whole magic of education. Like, you're trying to make complicated, long topics into understandable, short form content. I mean, that's the whole magic of it. And then if you also bring in like interactive tools where you can actually look at it and see like past and future performances and like how this is in your own situation. I mean, that's kind of brilliant to have all that in one place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm 42 years old, and I learned a few years ago, like I did some, what are my archetypes and my personality and kind of how I'm wired and all this stuff. And it turns out my number one archetype is teacher. Like I like helping people learn the things that I've learned without maybe having to go and step on the same landmines and learn the same lessons the hard way. Like if I can help people get to that same point faster and more efficiently, I want to do that, right? I want to help people, and Bitcoin has helped me or has given me a good opportunity to do that. And yeah, writing the ebook and kind of building some of these tools and calculators and giving people resources they can double click on if they want to learn more or get engaged. That's really at the heart of all of this.
And I've noticed with your retirement calculator, and I think we maybe before we get into calculators and on general the topic on retiring on Bitcoin, it's such a popular one. It's one of the surprises how popular this topic is. But like if you think about it, it's pretty understandable why it's so popular. How do you look at retiring on Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, it really just comes down to the math, right? I know that's kind of an annoying thing for me to say, but yeah, I mean, I think if if you are a Bitcoiner and if you're investing in Bitcoin and you believe in Bitcoin's continued growth, both nominally just from a compound annual growth rate and return standpoint, but also just based on its adoption, its embrace, and its overall proliferation across the world, financial markets, investing, et cetera, then you can start to think about, well, okay, how much Bitcoin would I need to live the life that I want to live based on, well, what are my monthly living expenses, right? And then what's the growth of those expenses? And so it's easy to look at it, I guess, based on just some of the simple math. But then what I've integrated into this as well is also looking at, well, if I don't want to sell my Bitcoin to get the money that I need each year to live, well, then what does this look like for me to borrow those dollars, right? So I know, some people don't want to sell their Bitcoin. Other people are much more in favor of not taking leverage on your Bitcoin. So it's really, it's up to the individual. But the way I've developed the calculator is to look at a couple different scenarios of using your Bitcoin as collateral, borrowing against it to fund your lifestyle, and then showing what that looks like in two different LTVs, like a 30% LTV and a 50% LTV, just to keep it conservative.
Interesting. Loan to value means like, just explain this quickly to the people that haven't heard about that.
Yeah, so think of the loan as the actual amount of money that you borrowed, right? So the loan, if you took out $100,000 loan and you were at a 50% loan to value, then think of the value as the value of your assets, so your Bitcoin. So at a $100,000 loan using a 50% LTV, the amount of Bitcoin value you would have to have is $200,000 worth of Bitcoin value.
I also love that you wait. I'll just bring it up quickly so people can see it. In the, is that the right one? Yeah. In your calculator. So that's the retire on Bitcoin calculator. And you put in not only the monthly expenses, which I don't know, that's 2.5K. Maybe that's a good a good starting point. And loan API. I don't know, like, what can we put there, like 4%?
I always use 10. I always use 10% just to make it easy and round.
Oh, yeah, true. And then this is, I think, is really interesting, because you need to have kind of the how much your year over year expenses are increasing, basically inflation rate, and how this is working. I don't know. It's hard to pick a number there, because like inflation rate can really skyrocket. But also, if inflation rate skyrockets, your Bitcoin skyrockets with that. So it also does not really matter if you hold the asset. But yeah, it's like it highly depends, and I think that's what you also teased in before when you talked about Microseed and the inflation rate, because it's like an individual thing for each and every one of the persons. If you don't have to pay for rent because you, I don't know, you're still young and live at home, and the only expense you have is a Netflix subscription, yeah, like you, in your inflation rate is really doesn't really matter that much. But if you want to live in a nice house in a nice neighborhood, and have kids and all of the expenses associated with that, your inflation rate can be quite high. that can be really troubling. What do you usually put in there?
I usually do 5%, and I do that just because, the increase could be because of just strictly inflation. Maybe your expenses are relatively static, but they are, being impacted by inflation. And, we can debate the actual inflation rate all day long. Some people say it's 10%, some people say it's CPI 2%. That's the whole point of this too, is to make it flexible. It's dynamic. You can model whatever you want and see what the outcomes are.
That's interesting. The CAGR is also an interesting one, because obviously it changes a lot in the model depending on what CAGR you're using. And we have a lot of discussions on CAGR. For example, like Michael Seyr, I think he foresees in the next 21 years a CAGR of 28.9%, I think. So if you're going over the next 20 years with Michael Saylor's model, that's that. The power law model is actually not that far away from that. Maybe a little bit less bullish. I think like power laws would be probably like around that here. And if you go with the hyper model, you have 38%. I mean, I think the last 5 years we had a CAGR of 55%. So this would be like something like that here, which would make the whole thing completely different to do that. And what can you explain to us what's going on here?
Yeah, and just for context, I mean, this is the V1 of this calculator. The site's getting like a UX update as well. So are some of the calculators. So some of this stuff might even look different by the time this is actually viewable. But so on the left you have the total number of Bitcoin required, and on the bottom you have the year. And so what you're looking at is, in order to borrow your monthly living expenses in an annualized fashion there, how much Bitcoin do you need to fund your lifestyle without or at that same LTV? Right. So as the amount of money that you are withdrawing and using to fund your lifestyle increases, it's typically going to start out increasing at a rate that's faster than the growth that you're seeing in your underlying Bitcoin stack. But eventually, if you believe that Bitcoin will grow at that rate, steadily over the course of this 20-year period, then eventually what happens is that amount of Bitcoin that you need peaks, because the underlying Bitcoin that, again, you're not ever selling, has eventually surpassed the amount, or I should say it has eventually surpassed um, the amount of what you're borrowing is no longer increasing your LTV. The amount you're borrowing is actually lowering your LTV, and that's why you see that at the beginning it goes up and it peaks, but then it eventually starts coming down because the underlying Bitcoin itself has the compound interest has surpassed basically what you're borrowing against it.
So this is the amount of Bitcoin required to have locked up in collateralized loans to borrow against them. It's not the amount of Bitcoin that you should hold, because I, I I don't know how to. Maybe you look differently at that topic, but I don't personally think you should borrow against your whole stack. I don't think that all of your stacks. So if you, in that example, you probably need around 2 Bitcoin at the height of it. So you need maybe to collateralize almost 2 Bitcoin at that point. If all you have is this 1.9 Bitcoin at the height of it, you probably shouldn't collateralize all of them, because there's also some risks with that. How do you look at that?
I totally agree. And this is really meant to show, you know, if you wanted to retire today, how much total Bitcoin would you need throughout a 20-year period, to kind of show you, well, the maximum amount I would need at a 50% LTV would be 1.9 Bitcoin, but that wouldn't even happen until year 5. So that actually gives people some ways to think about, well, okay, I've now got 5 years to maybe get to that point. Maybe I could start doing this now, understanding that I've got some other income, other assets that I'm going to be converting into Bitcoin, so that by year 4 or 5, I've got, how much I need to continue doing this throughout the next 15 or 20 years.
So then it's like, if you have, let's say, 5 Bitcoin and you have this monthly expenses of 2,500 and you needed the height of it 1.9, you're like, okay, like there's some security to it. And you're like, okay, I might be able to retire. And I mean, this whole retirement topic is interesting, because I personally think, even if you retire, you probably will figure out a way to make income with just following what you really want to do. I think if you, especially if you are not like 80 years old, even if you're 80 years old, it's possible. But if you're like, let's say like 40, 50 years old and you retire tomorrow, you might get bored. I heard that story from so many people. I've never was bored in my life, but I heard it from so many other people that said like, oh yeah, I kind of retired, and then I had so much time and I actually made a lot more money than I was making before, because I just built things that I really liked, and I didn't have the pressure of financial succession. And then it's like, yeah, I'll just made a profitable small business and make more money than before, because I now have the time to actually go ahead and do that. And that's the story of how it often goes. So this might just give you the confidence to pursue your own dream and not actually retire.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that's one of the benefits of investing in something like Bitcoin, where it has the ability to continue to grow and appreciate with time, and give you, more assets with which to make decisions on how to live your life. And, that's really at the heart of a lot of these calculators too, is like, the big disclaimer on the homepage, it's not financial advice. It's just basic education, right? It's like, see what's possible, right? Open your mind a little bit to some of these other ideas that could maybe then I don't know, give you ideas and give you inspiration on what you might do or how to do it or how to just think differently so that you're better prepared, better equipped to make some of these decisions that are, more in alignment with whatever your longer term goals might be. But you did say something that I didn't answer, but yeah, I mean, if you only need 2 Bitcoin to retire, but you've got 5 or 10, absolutely, right? I'm a big fan of cold storage. If you want something that's like multi-sig or whatever, go for it, right? Protect your assets at all costs. Leverage as little as you need to get the liquidity that funds your lifestyle, and protect the rest. Absolutely.
I personally decided to not do any borrowing right now, just because I have income and I don't need to borrow and don't do those things. I just love having everything in self custody. But it's a nice option to have, and I think the products will also get better, because I still think that there's like this Seyr model of like he wants to have an issuance credit of more than 10 years, the duration of those credits, and then less than 10% of interest rates. And a lot of the products are like short term, like for 18 months, 2 years or something like that. And then like, how high are they? Like everything above 10%, I usually stay away from that, and get something below that. And I used some credit back in 2022, where it was like, I think 8 years and 4%, which was amazing to have. Those are days. Those no, and there was no borrowing, so it was just like a loan without like my Bitcoin at risk. Where it's like, yeah, it's almost a no-brainer, because I know Bitcoin in the next 8 years will outperform those 4% interest costs that I have, with like a very easy jump. And so I just want to put that disclaimer in, because a lot of people think they're doing the Seyr strategy. And then when you look at what Seyr actually is recommending with this longer than 10 years, lower than 10% of interest rates, a lot of people actually don't do the Seyr strategy, but it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, Sailor's a whole different animal, right? I mean, his expertise and acumen and the people and resources around him for all the financial engineering that he's doing is kind of on a different level. I think, when I talk to people about like living a Bitcoin standard, right? That's one of the calculators that I've built as well, is really helping people who are already pretty far down the Bitcoin path and understand Bitcoin. They understand, what Bitcoin does, the problems that it solves. And they've come to me and say, hey, I want to take that next step. Like, what are you doing to get more allocated to Bitcoin? Or how are you living on your Bitcoin and borrowing dollars to live your life? And at that point, yeah, it's a relevant conversation, but sure, it does require more tools. It requires more processes. There's probably more counterparties involved in that. And that's not for everybody, right? Some people do want true self-sovereignty. They want self-custody. They want multi-sig, et cetera. They don't want to take leverage. And you know what? That's great. Those people are probably not going to be doing, the living a Bitcoin standard scenario, because again, that does require using your Bitcoin as collateral, borrowing against it to fund your lifestyle.
That's interesting. I just opened the calculator, and maybe you can explain us what's going on here with the living on a Bitcoin standard. What
Sure.
this one is doing. You have here. I just put some random example numbers in there, like 3,000 of net income. Before we had this 2,500 of expenses. So I was like, it might be interesting to have that. The same 10% of interest rates, the APR, yearly salary increase. I put it purposely under the inflation rate, because I think most people get less salary increase than the inflation rate. And just like put 4 and 8 in there as example. And again, the 28% of Saylor's CAGR that I now just use as an example here. What are we seeing here?
Yeah. So what you're seeing is the dark blue, kind of the darker annual income there. That's going to be your nominal income. So that's your salary plus the nominal pay raise that you're getting each year of 4%, right? So that's just the flat out dollars that you're making and the raises that you're getting. In the orange, you've actually got that income less the loss in purchasing power from inflation. So you can see that because of the spread between inflation and the salary increases, this person starts off, their annual income is the annual income after inflation, but at the end of this 20-year period, they're not making close to what they were making before because of how aggressively that spread is eroding their purchasing power. They're making 4% more in nominal dollars each year, but every year, all of those dollars buys them 8% less stuff. And when that compounds over a 20-year period, it's terrible, right? And that's really kind of going back to our initial conversation. Like, that's been part of the big inspiration for creating these tools, is to help people understand that a little bit better. And then in purple, what you're seeing is, well, okay, what if I took every dollar of my monthly income and I immediately bought Bitcoin, right? And this isn't necessarily suggesting how you would borrow money. Maybe you have a great lender. Maybe you have a great banker. Maybe you love DeFi. There's lots of different ways you can borrow money, right? But what this model is basically showing is, well, what if you converted all of your economic energy, all of that 3,000 per month, immediately into Bitcoin, and you figured out a way to borrow those monthly expenses at a 10% APR. Well, what would that look like over a 20-year period? And that purple line represents your annual income if you measured it in USD or if you measured it in Bitcoin's USD value.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey. And the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. And we have right now a summer sale going on for 15% off. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. day for $186, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. It's amazing. It's fascinating because it really shows. I put it a little bit back down because then you see the lines better. But if you put it at the rate that Seyr predicts that Bitcoin will grow at 28, and you start out with just an annual income of 36,000 a year, you end up making at the end of the 20 years already $75,000 a year, and then. But if you account for the purchasing power lost, you actually lose the purchasing. You actually lose in income, and maybe 4 and 8% is a little bit extreme. Of my example, if we, I don't know, put like 6% and 8% in there, so you start out with 36,000, you end up with 108,000 of actual income after 20 years, but your actual income actually decreased from 36,000 to 22,000 only. And for people that are just listening, it might be a little bit hard to follow us with all those numbers. But basically, your like normal annual income is like 100K. Your normal annual income after inflation is only 22,000, and then your actual annual income, if you have the Bitcoin strategy, is $1 million, so 10x more than you are making. And it's I mean, it's kind of easy to say, but it makes a huge difference if you earn per year $1 million or like 100K. And 100K is kind of like a good salary, but like a normal kind of a job, especially like depending on how old you are, what are you doing in entry level and what country. Like 100K in India is a different beast than 100K in America, and all of those things. But it makes a huge difference if you earn like 100K versus $1 million. And the Bitcoin strategy is just like, wow, like it is really powerful. This shows this calculator. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was sort of inspired by Seyr because he's doing something similar, which is sort of arbitraging the difference between what it costs to borrow fiat and invest all of it into Bitcoin. Right? So that calculator is showing you what the Bitcoin will do if you convert all of your income, all of your economic energy immediately into Bitcoin, and you borrow fiat at 10% to actually get the dollars you need to live your life. But if you're setting the Bitcoin CAGR to 28, 29% over those 20 years, toward the end of that, right, the value of your Bitcoin is really, really compounding and growing significantly. Whereas, yeah, I mean, the same $100,000 salary that you started with at the end of it, even if you got 5% raises per year, if the inflation is higher than that, well, then that nominal salary at the end of the 20 years buys you significantly less things than, what you're actually making. And I think that's been the biggest eye opener for me, is just understanding, loss of purchasing power due to debasement, due to inflation, and really just thinking about things differently. Like I have a daughter, and I try to communicate this to her. What is inflation? Why is it important? And she's like, yeah, she talks about the price of real estate and houses are going up. And I get her to think, well, is the price of the house going up, or are the value of the dollars needed to buy them just going down, and therefore you need more of them to buy the same house? And then she's like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, I had a breakthrough. She got that.
And this is a really good example. And I like I love the website. There are a lot of interesting calculators on there. There's a DCA calculator on there. And because this is what I think most people actually are doing, just dollar cost averaging. So you just like plowing like every month, every week, every whatever, and you are just purchasing Bitcoin on a DCA plan. And I actually researched that once. What is the average savings rate of like a human being on Earth per month? And I think it was close to $300 or $400, like something like that is what the average human being on Earth kind of saves per month. So if you're above that and if you're saving $1,000 or $2,000 per month, after all expenses, like you are doing freaking good. And so I just put like $300 12 times a year, so like once a month, 20 years. Let's stick with the same time frame. And inflation rate, I just put 10%. I think 10% is a good inflation rate. You said 5, right? Before you said 5% beforehand.
I typically use 5, but yeah, 10's cool.
What's changes here with 5 versus 10? It's only the real value that changes. Oh yeah, this one here, right?
Yeah, so the inflation impacts here is meant to show the reduction in purchasing power of your dollars sitting in your pocket. So the way I think about DCA and the way I've helped some people within my circles is just say, look, you've probably got some extra cash each month. You're just not saving it. You're not doing anything with it. Just come up with $100 every 2 weeks or every month that you can put into something like Bitcoin, because the alternative and the opportunity cost is that you're probably not doing anything with that money. It's probably just getting spent on entertainment or food or Uber Eats or, whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, the DCA strategy, I think it doesn't get enough praise. I mean, people talk about the volatility of Bitcoin, like, oh, it's too volatile. It's like, I don't want to invest. What if I buy the top? And I'm thinking, yeah, buy the top, but buy the bottom and buy the middle and buy everything. Like, just be consistent with your purchases. That will flatten out your cost basis so that over the long term, you're just exposed to that CAGR, right? That appreciation, but you've flattened out your cost basis by using a DCA strategy.
And it's kind of amazing when you put in those numbers and you kind of see that if you're just putting the $300 a month over 20 years in at a 5% inflation rate, your end value of that, so like your actual cash value that you put in is like $45,000 dollars. But then if you put it in Bitcoin, you have 2 million. like you go from 45,000 to 2 million, which is like an enormous difference in having to save something. And I think that's very achievable. I think probably a lot of viewers that listen here probably save more than $300 a month. I would just assume. It would be fun to ask, but I always ask in my community things, and people are making jokes, like nice try, IIS, because I'm just curious about like who's my community and where they are at life. But yeah, I would just guess most people. I think my viewers are doing really good, so I think the $300 is probably like conservative. And if you're doing that, you end up with $2 million. That's pretty good. And if you're like young with 25 years old like me, and you're doing it for 20 years, with 45 years old, you have retirement money. That's right. That's amazing.
That's right. Yeah. And the outputs are all dependent on the inputs. So, your scenario was 20 years getting 28% growth compounding every year. So that's obviously going to produce a more aggressive output. But that's also why I put on the CAGR bar there. You've got Saylor's bear, base, and bull case, the little icons. There's a little bear and the other one's on there. But yeah, I mean, that's really the power and the flexibility of the tools. It's interactive, it's dynamic, and you can come in there and model whatever you want, right? And it's not a one-time thing. You can drag and drop and kind of see how the outputs change. And I'm adding an FAQ section as well. I got a lot of feedback about just different questions. And so each of these calculators will also have an FAQ attached to it. So you can actually see the math that's happening in the background. You can kind of get more of an overview without it sort of overpowering the calculator page. I want to keep the calculator pages simple and not overly cumbersome. So there will be another link in there to an FAQ, so you can see each calculator, like the math that's happening in the background as well.
There's something interesting that I haven't seen before. I haven't seen the calculator. That's the rental real estate versus Bitcoin hodl. How did this come to be?
Yeah, that's a complex one. That came to be because in my past, I've also done some real estate investing and development work. I built a property, I bought and sold some property. And so throughout that process, I got to know real estate investment strategy, some of the different terms and terminology, right? What is cash on cash returns, cash flows, things of that nature? How does all this kind of fit together in like a broader real estate investment strategy? And you see this on Bitcoin or on crypto Twitter all the time. People are like, oh no, real estate's a better investment because you have cash flow and you have this and you have depreciation and you have tax benefits and blah, blah, blah. And you have the Bitcoin maxis saying, no, just hodl Bitcoin. It's going to outperform, and you don't have tenants, and you don't have maintenance and all this other stuff. And so the purpose of that calculator was to actually let people key in their values based on real estate assets and strategies that are of interest to them, and plug in metrics and actually see, well, what does perform better over a 10-year period? Is it this cash flowing real estate investment, or is it my Bitcoin if instead of buying the rental property, I just took that 20 or 25% down payment and I just bought Bitcoin with it and I held it for the 10-year term?
Interesting. Maybe we can get an example here. Going. I mean, it's a little bit complex. Like there's a lot more inputs here. I just put I don't know, a home price of 600,000. Like homes are super expensive these days. If you calculate for everything, 20% down seems to be normal.
So the down payment there is. You have to put the cash number in. So if you want to do 20%, put in 180,000.
Oh, okay, 180,000. Interesting, because I was confused because there's a percentage as interesting. Then I think we put always 10%, but like for a home alone, it's probably lower than that, right?
Yeah, I think they're somewhere between 6 and 6.5 currently. You could just do 6.
That's half the length of mortgage, 30 years, 10 years. What is the mortgage here?
Typically a 30-year. Yep.
Yeah, 30 years. Annual home appreciation, which is that's a it probably highly depends on where the home is, and because also homes can not appreciate even in an inflationary environment. But what do you usually put in there in how much the home appreciates?
I typically do 5%, but other regions might be lower. Some other regions might be higher.
Oh wait, rental income. So that's for someone actually buying a home and renting it out.
Yes. So this model is comparing cash flowing real estate, investment real estate. So this is going to show you what the rental performance would be compared to Bitcoin. The other nuance of this calculator is that it's also assuming that the cash flows from the real estate are being invested into Bitcoin. So it's not just cash flowing real estate per se, it's also taking those cash flows as a way of acquiring more Bitcoin and saying, okay, I'm going to invest in real estate, use my cash flows to buy more Bitcoin over time, as opposed to just taking that initial down payment and just buying the Bitcoin.
Interesting. What is a rental income for a $600,000 home? I have like zero clue about that.
$3,000
monthly expenses. Like expenses for property, not including the debt servicing. I mean, how much is out of a monthly expenses usually for that?
Probably $500.
Rent in Greece. if you're not living in an area where it's controlled, if you're not living in socialism, I don't know, like 5%.
Yeah, 5% good. Rent, do 3,200 for rent.
32. Okay, perfect. So rental income.
Yep. And then you can set the Bitcoin CAGR at whatever metric you want.
I'll keep it with 28. Oh, it does some. Oh, nice. There was some animation going on live.
Well, it was calculating for all of the numbers that before you landed on. What would you land on there? 25 or is that 28?
28. I used the 28 as from Saylor's model.
28. Yep. Okay. I'm looking at the same one now. Yeah. So what you're seeing in the left there is really all of the outputs from the traditional mortgage, right? You've got a principal payment, you've got a down payment. It shows you how much you financed of the home. It shows you what your annual payment looks like. It's then going to take your rental income and it's going to reduce your expenses to come up with your cash on cash returns, right? So after you reduce your expenses from the income that you're generating, what's left, right? What's left to actually go and buy the Bitcoin every month? And that's where you see the COCR on the left there. That's 1.21%. Right? So that's your dollar value. That's the top number is your nominal dollar value. The middle number is the annual dollar value, and the bottom is the percentage. Real estate investors, and as far as cash on cash return goes, it really is it's dependent on so many factors, and with interest rates being so high, cash on cash returns aren't going to be great right now because it's the investor that's carrying the mortgage and they're renting out the property. Right. And so a lot of times you're seeing these cash on cash return numbers are small single digits right now. But you go back to the zero rate interest environment that we were in, people were getting mortgages for 2 and 3%. You could see cash on cash returns up in the high single digit, low double digit numbers. And so the rest of the column there in the rental RE is really just showing, okay, well, how much have you paid after 10 years? What's the home worth? What's the equity value that you've accumulated? And then how much Bitcoin have you purchased with your free flowing cash that you've generated from the rental? So a lot of different things happening in the rental RE, right? And then on the right side, it's pretty straightforward. It's, well, what if I just took the same down payment that I used to buy that house and go through all that hassle and do all those things, and I just bought Bitcoin and sat on it for the same 10-year period? And, it's in this particular scenario, of course, with the growth rate you've queued in and the rental income, et cetera, yeah, Bitcoin HODL seems to make more sense.
It's a situation where it makes less sense. Like if we go way down on the thing, yeah, like if Bitcoin only grows with like, what is it, 9%, all of a sudden it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and if you go over to the loan APR and just click the arrow down one time, right? So just changing the APR that you're going to pay as far as interest, you see how that impacted the cash on cash return? So if you go to loan APR and you check it down, you see it now you're close to 3%, right? Now go knock the loan APR down again one more time. Now all of a sudden you can see your cash flow is increasing because the amount of money that you're paying for the debt service is going down by 100 basis points every time. And that's freeing up more cash to invest in Bitcoin. So there are plenty of scenarios where a high cash flowing rental property will allow you to accumulate more Bitcoin value than just buying and holding Bitcoin itself. And that's why I think it's important for people to know, like, yeah, sure, I'm a huge believer in Bitcoin, but that's not to say that all of these calculators are just going to say that you should go buy Bitcoin. Like, no, there's probably people that are plugging in numbers to this particular model and seeing that, their rental property and their Bitcoin allocation strategy is actually coming out ahead of just buying and holding Bitcoin.
And I think it makes a huge difference what you think, how convinced you are of Bitcoin. Because if you think, even if you say you have 7% of APR, if Bitcoin only grows with 7% per year, real estate is outperforming almost double the Bitcoin, not double, like 1.8 or something like that. But if you say, hey, like I'm a hyperbole, I think Bitcoin will grow the next, I don't know, is there a time frame on that? There isn't, right?
This is 10 years.
Oh, 10 years. 10 years. Oh, no. The long term is 30 years. Is it, wait, is it 30 years or
Well,
10 years?
that's just the loan. Yeah, the 30 years, you're just taking out a 30-year mortgage. But typically, an investment property like this might be something that somebody goes and acquires a property, they retrofit it, they upgrade it, they let it appreciate for 10 years and then offload it. So this is just looking at a 10-year hold period, even though the mortgage itself, the loan, is structured on a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because it's not unreasonable to think, like, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Bitcoin might grow at maybe a 30% CAGR. Then it makes a whole lot of sense to just hold Bitcoin. But if you're like, oh, I don't think Bitcoin will grow with 30%, I think Bitcoin will grow with 10%, all of a sudden, real estate makes a whole bunch of sense because you actually get more Bitcoin with that strategy. So that's why I like those calculators, because you can input your reality and you're like, oh, that's how it is, and you don't have to go through all the hustle and like make an Excel sheet and all those things. Yeah, I like it. Really cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see the Excel screenshots and I see the different videos that people are sharing their models, which is great. Like I love Excel. I use Google Sheets all the time. But I wanted to figure out how can I make it more dynamic, more hands-on, make the inputs easier, right? Just let people go and key some basic values in and do some drag and drop and just see what the outputs are, right? And have more of a fun, interactive experience.
I run my business on Excel sheets. It's crazy. With Google Sheets is even collaborative. So, for example, with the podcasting, we have a Google Sheets where we track where an episode is already in the workflow, that the editor already edited, that thumbnail design already had the thumbnails. Like for me, Google Sheets, it's an amazing tool, even to work together and to quickly crunch something up. But obviously, it's better to have a nice platform and like just put in the inputs and have some graphs. But this gets also like easier and easier. I'm fascinated by AI. Like you just put in your things and you're like, hey, AI is building me the graph to do it. How much do you use AI? A little sidetrack here, but you probably use it a lot to build this whole thing.
Um, so I didn't use AI to build any of the content or the UX. I do have a developer and a designer that I use for all of the front end creation. I do use ChatGPT. I love ChatGPT, like just to polish my words, make sure my grammar's correct, help me structure things and get the language correct, and play around with different themes, right? Sometimes you want to have a certain theme or a certain tone to something that you're trying to say, and ChatGPT is phenomenal for giving you suggestions about those things. But yeah, as far as some of the newer aged AI tools for creating content and doing web development and coding and things of that nature, I haven't dipped my toe into that yet. I think I'm 42 years old, so I think I'm a little bit. I have to go back and learn some of that stuff, right? I'm using some of the newer cutting edge tools, but I'm not super savvy with some of the modern AI technology just yet, other than the large language models like ChatGPT.
Yeah, and I use almost only ChatGPT, but I used it, for example, to clone a Nostr client. You're aware of Nostr, right? And basically like, hey, how can I make a Nostr client? And then like it was set up in like 10 minutes. I had Primal cloned, and then it's like, hey, how can I change that? Upload the code. He knows where to change it, and like, oh, go to this file. And in line 50, change this to that, and you're like, huh? Oh wait, like it's actually happening. And so like you're almost a developer if you really want to. I was a developer, and I'm no longer doing that. But it's just fun to play around with those things. Because we talked so much about Kager and Saylor's model. What's your take on what do you expect as an Kager for Bitcoin going forward?
Oh, that's always a fun one, right? I think Seyr does a good job of kind of distilling it down and providing a bit of a range. Um, I think the historic CAGR metrics are good, is a good sort of signal to look at for what the future might hold, perhaps with some sort of decay. Um, as the asset gets bigger and bigger, it's going to require more fresh new liquidity to move the price at the same levels, right? And so I do think that we will slowly see the CAGR come down over time, but we're still at such the infancy stage of all of this, just from an adoption standpoint. I mean, it's a 2.2, $2.3 trillion asset in a world of 900 trillion in assets. So I don't know. I think I like to model things conservatively using like 20% CAGR over the next 10 years or so. But at the same time, I could easily see us doing 50% average for the next few years, perhaps more, perhaps less. But I'm extremely bullish.
I love that. I I have two sides of the coins. For me, when I use any calculations of like how to retire on Bitcoin, all of those things, I'm the most conservative of all of them. I usually go just like, hey, I think it will just grow at 15%. Like very conservative. Like I have a hard time believing that Bitcoin will go under 15% CAGR in the next 10 years. Like that's like, I have a very hard time believing that over 10 years, not like in individual years. Obviously it can help happen. But my true belief is a lot higher. I personally think we'll grow at like 35% in the next 10 years, and might even be higher depending on if we enter like a hyperinflation, like a real inflationary situation. But just from a purchasing power, I'm a hyper bull on Bitcoin. But when it comes to personal finance, better safe than sorry. Like I don't calculate on the 35%, I calculate on 15%. And I'm happy to take the 35% because I like to see it there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how I think about it as well. And, kind of going back to something we talked about at the beginning, do I think Bitcoin will perform better than insert whatever the asset class is? Gold. Gold has been increasing more and more over the past few years, but do I think Bitcoin will outperform gold or real estate or, S&P index funds? Yeah, I mean those, the Nasdaq is what 13, 14% if you're kind of getting some of the average benchmarks there. The S&P is 10 to 12. Real estate is 5. Do I think Bitcoin's going to at least outperform those asset classes? Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it's like worst case scenario, I'm going to get a return that looks like, a return from another asset class where I might invest my time and energy, but I'm now exposed to this much bigger upside of, well, if it does 50%, then, that's icing on the cake.
I love that. Yeah. It's like, what else would you even like? The question is always, okay, you have your life, you're doing income, you're doing your business and all those things. But even if you are feeling, oh, like what is the Bitcoin? Then you're like, still, what else would you buy right now? And we're doing the real estate, like, even if real estate would outperform Bitcoin, I really don't want to deal with tenants and fixing toilets on a Sunday because I cannot reach anyone else and they are complaining. Like why would I do that? And then it's also, okay, what else is there? There's like fiat. Of course, it's performing worse. Then there's like, oh yeah, there's gold. Yeah, I don't think gold will outperform Bitcoin. And it's also a hustle to hold it. And then it's like there's stocks, like good luck picking stocks. It's a lot of work. I did it before Bitcoin. I was very successful with it, but it's a lot of work. I was staying up at 1 a.m. in the morning to hear the conference calls in America, and like, oh yeah, like, okay, what did he say? Like, oh, okay, okay, is that good? Like, is that company will perform good? Because just because they have a good product, maybe the management team sucks. Like we had a lot of those companies publicly traded where the management team just effed up and a great product, a great idea, just like was not performing. So you're like, I just stick with Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, Seyler talks about that really, really well. Is sure, if Bitcoin is just another asset, okay, and if we take away its growth and its appreciation, what's left? Well, you've got all the different risk factors, right? What are the different risk factors that I strip away with Bitcoin that exist in things like real estate or stocks, right? Equities, and having a board and having shareholders and having a CEO and having centralized infrastructure, right? And so I think at the end of the day, even if you're not looking at the appreciation history and the Bitcoin has been the best performing financial asset ever, right? So, but taking that away, it still offers quite a few benefits: peace of mind, self sovereignty, and a complete. It's completely devoid of counterparty risk if you are, holding in self custody and managing your own keys and doing things of that nature. So, even outside of the appreciation value, there's just so many other benefits to Bitcoin that, yeah, are frankly headaches and risks and, things that have just become less desirable in a lot of these other asset categories.
100%. I full-heartedly agree with you. We have one question that asked each and every one of my guests, and you might know the question. What can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Besides Bitcoin, I would kind of go back to my story and how I got into Bitcoin. And I think a lot of people talk about this in general, which is, do something that you're passionate about, and work is going to be so much more interesting to you and supply and provide such a better quality of life. I was in the rat race for 20 years, and I did it. I did good. I was a high achiever. I made good money, but man, I got into my early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, and it just was like, am I actually doing something that ignites who I am as a person? Like, am I waking up excited to go and do life that day and, get after it? And now that I've really just focused all of my energy into Bitcoin and helping people understand Bitcoin and helping people solve problems with Bitcoin, like, my life just has kind of a new zest to it, right? It's more exciting, it's more fun. I feel like I'm helping people. I'm really tapping into who I am, just in terms of my personality, my characteristics, like my archetype of being a teacher and wanting to help people. And so I just feel like, I've the last few years have allowed me to do all of that more effectively. And so I don't know. I guess that's what I would say. Follow your dreams, follow your passions, and life gets better.
And this is so much easier with Bitcoin. Thank you so much, Shane, for being on. We have an end routine still. I almost forgot it. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: what's your best performing orange pilling method?
Performing orange pilling method. I think it's getting people to understand the dark truth about the central banking system, especially the Federal Reserve, how it got started in 1913, the meeting on Jekyll Island, what their goals were, and then just understanding the basic timeline of events that happened from that point forward. So that's why I wrote the book, the Fiat Trap, to highlight those things and provide people with a quick summary of what that timeline looks like. Because I have found that to be the best method, is just get people to understand the dark, corrupt, broken nature of the money and the financial system. That gets them thinking about solutions.
It's a good way. Like if they understand the problem, they're more likely to be open and understanding the solution. And I'm always stunned by how many people don't get the problem. It's really out there. Like if you think the problem is obvious, go out on the street and ask 50 people about the problem with the money.
Absolutely. Well, I had that same epiphany when reading Creature from Jekyll Island, which I would encourage anybody, if you prefer harsh truth over convenient lies, read Creature from Jekyll Island. It's dark and it's kind of scary, right? When you think that, wow, wait a minute, these people actually created this financial system with these goals in mind, and this is what's been happening since then. Like, this whole time I thought the adults were in charge taking care of us. Turns out, no, that's not the case at all. But yeah, I think to your point, understanding that truth and understanding the history of money and central banks, etc. Like it is important.
And I don't even want adults to be in charge because absolute power absolutely corrupts absolutely, something like that. I don't know. I probably butchered that right now. But if there's the perfect central banker and he has great policies and he really takes care in a good way of our money, it's just a question of time till he gets corrupted. Or if he doesn't get corrupted, it's just a matter of time till someone comes in his position that gets corrupted. So money where human beings are in charge won't ever work. Like it will always fail. And yeah, that's a big epiphany also I had. Yeah. Thank you so much, Shane, for being on the show. It was a pleasure talking with you and seeing all those calculators, man. It was really cool to see that. I think it's really nice to have, like, I couldn't think of a better website, honestly, to have all those things in there. Seriously, I couldn't think of any other website that does the same thing. Yeah, thank you so much for doing the work for Bitcoin, providing some value, providing some tools for us. And before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on X, bitcoinmath_org, active on there. You can also reach out through the bitcoinmath.org website if you have questions or you need help, or we're happy to make suggestions. We interact with people that way too. And that's really it, Shane at Bitcoin Math. Yeah, sorry. Shane at bitcoinmath.org if you want to send me a message directly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.